My Lords, not all taxpayers are required to notify HMRC when they leave the country. As such, the Government does not hold comprehensive data on the number of individuals leaving the UK by income level. The Government is committed to ensuring the UK remains a competitive and attractive location for internationally mobile talent and investment. We continue to support growth through a competitive tax framework and a world-leading business environment.
The Noble Lord the Minister is right. HMRC have no idea of the number of people who have left the country with that high income. The Chartered Institute of Taxation and myself have tried to find it, and it doesn't exist. However, most helpfully, the Sunday Times last Sunday looked at people from Companies House database who have told Companies House that they're leaving the country. And they estimate that as few as 1 in 6 and as many as 1 in 3 of people on the Sunday Times wealth list have left the country. Can the Noble Lord the Minister explain why he thinks that is and how that helps the growth agenda?
Well, as the Noble Lord himself says, the data is not available, so I'm not sure he can make the conclusions that he's seeking to make. The data will not be available until the January 2027 self-assessment data, and that is the most reliable data. The costings that were certified by the OBR for the previous government's and this government's reforms account for a potential behavioural response. They factor in an assumed level of migration from non-DOMs, just as they did for the previous government reforms, and the OBR have said that there is no evidence to change the estimated impact of the reforms on migration. I think this is nothing new. This has always been a highly mobile population. For example, in 2023-24, there were 9,100 arrivals and 9,500 leavers. So the Noble Lord knows, as I say, this is absolutely nothing new. We have the reforms to the tax treatment of non-DOMs have been specifically designed to make the UK competitive with a modern, simple tax regime that is also fair.
I do have a personal interest in this, but does the government recognise that outdated tax treaties are driving away talent that the UK wants, especially in life sciences and AI? Many overseas nationals, especially Americans, end up paying significantly more tax than any equivalent UK-only citizen. It's not a non-DOM issue. It's a failure to modernise Reeves to deal with tax savings like ISAs, investments in mutual funds, and the complexity of death duties. Will the government get to grips with this?
Well, I do actually believe that the new regime, the new residence-based regime, is more competitive for new arrivals than the previous rules. It's more attractive than the previous approach. They can bring their foreign income and gains into the UK without attracting an additional tax charge. And these changes will encourage individuals to spend and invest these funds in the UK.
My Lords, isn't it not the case that if you are a patriot, you are obliged to pay your fair share of tax? Yeah. And the people who don't want to do that are not patriots? Yeah.
Well, I would certainly say that, of course, we must ensure that the wealthiest pay their fair share of tax towards the public finances. But equally, of course, successful businesses and entrepreneurs who create jobs and wealth are the engine of economic growth in this country, and we must do all that we can to support them.
City AM. Nearly 6,000 British business owners.
Mr. Turn the crossbenches.
Would the Noble Lord the Minister agree with me that the tax avoidance industry in this country appears to continue to thrive? And if so, how does he explain that?
Well, I think this government has been very clear that we will close down any tax loopholes that we can while ensuring that the tax regime remains highly competitive. And that's, I think, exactly what we are doing.
The Minister talked about celebrating entrepreneurs and business creation. According to City AM, nearly 6,000 British business owners quit the UK over the past 2 years. Why is this?
Not. Well, I think, as I've already said, there is not reliable data to back up the Noble Lord's claims. As I say, the reliable data will be available in January 2027 when the self-assessment returns are made. The data does not exist to make the claims that the Noble Lord is saying. The UK is a great place to start a business, but our companies are not scaling at the same rate as their US peers, and we are taking action to ensure that is the case. We are taking action to ensure that the business environment in this country remains competitive and we have a competitive tax rate.
My Lords, is my noble friend the Minister aware of the hard data provided by patriotic millionaires, which shows that a strong majority are proud to live in this country, believe that it is patriotic to pay their fair share of tax, and in fact are prepared to pay a little more, particularly to help younger people.
I am aware of the points that my noble friend says, and I'm sure I agree with much of what she says. As I say, successful businesses and entrepreneurs who create jobs here and wealth in the UK are the engine of economic growth, and we need to support them to succeed. And of course, as my noble friend says, we must also ensure that the wealthiest pay their fair share towards the public finances.
My Lords, I believe that we should encourage rich people to reside and to stay in the UK. Since, for example, the top 1% of those paying income tax contribute 29% of receipts. Unfortunately, government policies not only on non-doms but also on inheritance tax and other taxes have encouraged them to leave in large numbers, and that's young people as well as old people. Since this is against the national interest, will the government adjust their policies to reverse this unfortunate trend and study the detail further?
No, and I don't think the noble lady can make the claims that she's making based on the data, as I've already said, that is available. The previous government's reforms assumed that there would be migration of non-doms. This government's reforms assume there will be migration of non-doms, and the OBR have said that there is no evidence to change the estimated impact of the reforms on migration. The reforms to the tax treatment of non-doms have been specifically designed to make the UK competitive with a modern, simple tax regime that is also fair. The noble lady mentions other tax reforms. The government's tax reforms in the round to the non-dom regime and to capital gains tax keep the UK an attractive place to live and to invest, while ensuring everyone who is a long-term resident pays their taxes here, helping to fairly fund our public services.
Does the Minister remember at the time of the Brexit referendum the argument that the divide in Britain was between the intellectual elite, who were people from anywhere, and the real people of Britain, who were people from somewhere? Are we not hearing an argument that it's the rich who are the people from anywhere and don't have any loyalty to Britain, particularly and might move, and that the rest of us are much more patriotic? Could we not hope to hear from the Conservative Party and from Reform an argument that the rich should also be patriotic and committed to this country?
Well, I absolutely understand the points the noble lord is making. I'm not sure it's for me to speak on behalf of any other party. I will just point to the points that my noble friend made about patriotic millionaires, that the vast majority of people in this country feel patriotic about their country and want to pay their taxes here.
As the lawyers are so fond of saying, for the avoidance of doubt, would it be fair to say, or it would be interesting to know from the noble lord the minister, whether if you are earning over £100,000 a year and paying your taxes, you can still be classified as a working person?
Well, a working person is someone who goes out to work.
With the legislation that is envisaged in the King's speech in relation to members of this House, deal with those who are refusing to pay their fair share of tax?
I think I'm very happy to say that probably is not a matter for me.
It's not a question of being patriotic.
Tax feel that they are unfairly having to support a vast number, maybe just as many, who are living on welfare and benefits, and that the hard-working people are having to support those who don't. I sense a growing feeling of unfairness.
I would just point out to the noble lady that the vast majority of people on benefits, as she puts it, are also in work, working hard every day to provide for their families, and it's quite right that the state should help them to do so.
Lords, the point is that £100,000 is not a huge amount of money, I'm afraid to say. I'm glad the Labour peers want to pay that, but it's very important to encourage people to stay here to keep their money in the country. If they're taxed beyond belief, they leave. And that's not just any old Conservative peer, it's people throughout the streets, and he must know that. Does he agree with that?
Well, the noble lord says that £100,000 isn't very much money. He may like to know that average earnings are around £33,000, well below the higher rate threshold, and around 80% of taxpayers pay only the basic rate.